buckets. From around the world to your backyard.
Zuzu Radio.
Welcome to Zuzu Radio. I'm your host, Brandon. I'm here with
Mark Duggan.
Mark Duggan. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Pleasure. So you are a top-tier photographer with a wide range to your work. You've done everything from weddings and headshots to bands and burlesque, and really so much more, I imagine. And regardless of the context, you have this unique ability to connect with your subjects and capture something that showcases their aura or their energy, their core energy. That's really impressive to me, and I'm looking forward to kind of getting into what you do to make that connection, but I want to sort of start off by asking, what drew you to the visual arts? Was it always photography, or were there a lot of mediums that you were testing out and then you found that one? How'd you settle in?
So in high school, I was as unflattering a human as you could possibly see, but I thought I looked cool because I was always carrying around my grandfather's camera. And so it was kind of a prop. It was something to orchestrate conversations around. It gave me like a sense of purpose. If I was having like typically like anxiety in some kind of like social situation, I could break it out and be like, oh, sorry, I'm kind of like working now. Like I'm gonna capture the moments as you guys live your lives. Fast forward to me having no idea what I'm going to do with my life, like so many of us in college, and I'm at SUNY Fredonia, and 19 years ago today, my dad passed away. Oh, wow. And I was just conquering like all of my undergrad, general, the math class, the science class. Also, the arts class, which I happened to be in sculpture at the time. And so this big, once in a lifetime horrible event happens. And it was such an amazing place to channel all of that energy. And like, I became like the stereotypical, like, I got a lot of negative pent up feelings and like, there's a place for it now. So the sculptures that I was making, I mean, some of them were literally him. Like, it was like, I was like trying to replace something that I had just lost. Oh, wow. And being a weirdo performance artist sculptor got me through college with pretty good grades. But then I end up where I started, still not knowing what I want to do with my life, because that is not the most useful degree you could possibly get. And so I taught for a couple of years. I was like a janitor. I bounced around and ended up volunteering overseas, basically to escape my college loans. And that was where I really picked up my camera, like had more of a sense of purpose. I went from being like conversation prop to I'm photographing victims of hurricanes, street children, orphanages that have 200 kids on like an island with 200 people. Like it was insane. And so that was the longest answer ever to no sense of direction. I just kind of landed here. It started as a prop for me. And now it's my life.
Yeah, that's so interesting because it seems pretty natural that art is a way to sort of express and, I don't know, process grief. Mm-hmm. Like that's a huge part of art. And the other side of it seems like you got both worlds here, is like art is a buffer for anxiety, social anxiety in a way. I mean, I've said this before, but one of the reasons I started the label was because it was easier to ask people that I admired to release something on my label rather than, hey, do you want to collab with me? You know, it's like there's just this layer between us that makes it easier. You know? And so I'm curious, when you were doing your sculptures and you were sort of processing, the loss of your dad, were you finding sort of a relief valve in that? Was it helping, or was it just, sometimes like I try and make art and I'm too close to the thing and I can't process it through the art. Other times it works. I don't know.
It was helpful in a number of ways. One, I was always trying to tackle a different medium. So I'm like, all right, if I'm going to make something about him or the subject right now, and I'm going to be welding, I'm now learning welding. So it's like turning off the sad part of my brain and turning on the I have a new task to orient my life around part of my brain. And then the best part, the like cathartic part would be you have a crit. And everybody sits around and talks about whether your work is shitty or amazing. And you're like, I don't care because this is about a thing that means something to me. And you defend yourself. And I should have been in actual therapy at the time, but it was a great way to talk my way through things that I probably didn't even realize at the time I needed to be talking about.
I see.
Yeah.
Oh, that's really cool. Yeah, interesting. Was there a first image, painting, drawing? What was it visually that struck you that put the camera around your neck? You know, because there's a moment probably before you discovered that this thing could be a tool for you, but was there something that led you in?
Ooh, I love that. I love that you're asking questions that I haven't asked myself. I mean, immediate answer is probably the honest answer, right? And it's not a photo. It is more what directed me towards sculpture at that time. But this is such a weird, I wish I had a better answer. Like old, like Greco-Roman sculptures that are just heads, that are just like the idea that this thing, and again, this goes into like my dad shit, but like this thing isn't the person, but it is, to our knowledge, the best representation of what that person looked like. So my first appreciation of images in general was something about this is not that person, but this is the way we're going to know them. And we know, I don't know, like there are just so many, like Zeus or whoever the hell, like, and that's not even a real person, obviously, but like, but you have an image in your head of what that person looks like.
Yes.
And so something about that, I mean, even in college, all I wanted to do was learn to sculpt like anatomically accurate. I wanted to take like anatomy classes more than I wanted to learn to weld, because I wanted to figure people out. And so now it's not that. Like, it's not attracted to one type of image. It's just any type of image that, as you kind of said earlier, best embodies that person, which is a different challenge every single time.
Yeah. Wild. Okay, so one thing that pops to mind first is the idea of portraits, because I know that you do a lot of headshot work and you're kind of capturing someone's likeness. So I could see a parallel between those two things where anatomically you're like trying to take time out of the equation and be like, this is this person sort of, infinitely represented. Mm-hmm. That's really cool.
Well, and if I could piggyback, like, you kind of talked earlier, like, about the aura and stuff like that. Like, yeah, my work has been wide ranging. I want it to get wider and weirder. But for the headshot stuff, it's what pays the bills, but it's also kind of the most challenging because those people don't want to be there. They're not a band that is like excited to put on whatever their grungiest outfit and go to like some weird location. It is like a 70-year-old insurance salesman who needs to look good on a business card and doesn't like the way he looks every day. So the challenge there is like, get him cozy, find ways that light him in a flattering way, get him in comfortable positions, but also flattering positions. And so that's, like you said, the anatomy thing, like, I want to get that guy's anatomy, but I want to get it right for him. You know?
Yeah. Keep him looking good.
Yeah, there's different ways to move your anatomy.
Yeah. We're going to get to posing, too, because I think that's an underrated skill when it comes to being the photographer, how you're positioning them to get the best out of whatever they're representing, their energy. Yeah. Do you consider the time element, though? You're really, like, creating this thing where it's locked in the moment, right? And no matter how much time goes by, there's proof that it was like this at one time. Mm-hmm. Does time play into your conception of the way you work and your artistry, or is it something that is just like an after the fact, well, yeah, I guess that's that moment?
Definitely a recognition of that's that moment, but my goal in every one of these interactions is I'm going to see you again. So like, I like the idea of thinking of it as, we're catching this chapter right now, but like, I'll see you a couple pages down the line, kind of. I think I don't know. Maybe if I was at a grander scale and I was working with like a celebrity and I knew that was my one time with that person, I would think about it in a more, how can I get you in this granular moment situation? Yeah. But now it's more about the interaction in that moment, how we play off of each other, and then hug, bye, see you again, I hope. Yeah. The ever-evolving relationship between you and the subject. You're looking forward to that next time around. I am. In a way. Yeah. That's cool. Like chapters. Yeah. I like that.
How about video? You are very photo focused. Was filmmaking or any sort of video work something that you were drawn to, or was it always the still image? You like just the static?
No, not that I think I prefer it. I'm definitely more comfortable in that world. The same kid that was carrying his grandfather's like SLR around his neck also had like a 1998 camcorder and stuff like that, and there was like
Nice.
skateboarding videos and stuff like that.
Oh, okay.
It's just not every time I do it, I enjoy the process, but then I watch a film that I respect and I'm like, man, I was nowhere near that. And so to the extent that what I do is a relationship interaction kind of thing, I want to do that to the best of my ability for a person. And every time I do one of those, I'm like, oh, it's fun. It's fun for me. I'm not sure you loved what you got. So it is very much like even like the very kindly worded burlesque that you call it. Even for that stuff, like I offer it as an add-on and I'm like, I'm not going to charge you. Like this is just for funsies. It's a different art form. And there's just so many more aspects to be mindful about. It's not just like lighting and positioning. Like sound terrifies me.
That's really difficult part of filmmaking for sure. Yeah. The sound can suffer so easily, and when it's not a Hollywood production and you don't have a budget and you're dealing with the elements of whatever's around, an air conditioner humming or traffic noise or whatever, it gets in there and suddenly the image that you have of what is like film or what film should be like suddenly moves down a peg. And
it's literally like if I was just shooting stills and somebody was like, I'm taking away this one light you're used to. It's like, it's no longer what I would make,
Yeah.
Very quick piggyback. I've been renting out my studio recently, which is like it's been a really nice additional source of income that allows me to not work so hard on the having to hustle to find photos portion of my income or photo work.
Yeah.
And like 2 weeks ago, Netflix was in the studio interviewing Jim Kelly. Yeah, I know. It was wild. I'm like, what is my life right now? The second they started the interview with this poor man who's like suffered cancer so many times and like his mouth is just like a ball of marbles.
Yeah, difficult for him to speak for sure.
Somebody starts like jackhammering right outside of my door, and I'm
no.
Sorry guys, and they're like, we're in from California for only today, so we're just gonna go with it. And that's the kind of thing that it's an additional factor that terrifies me for that reason.
I see. So
you can't control sound as easy.
Yeah,
I can close blinds. I can like crank my light up brighter to cancel out other lights. You can't cancel sound as easy.
Do you enjoy the control element of your process?
Too much. I think I take comfort in it. I wish, because it's my livelihood, right? So I want to know that what I'm making for somebody is in that moment something that they're going to walk away. If I showed them the back of my camera immediately, they'd be like, "Oh shit, look at me! I didn't know that could happen." And so with that comes not a restriction, but I'm skittish about flexing too many weird muscles. Like, what if I threw a green light over here for no particular reason? Or what if instead of my like super controlled light that I'm used to using, I bounced it off of like a piece of bent up tinfoil or something like that, which I think could be a ton of fun. But that's where like the play comes in. Like most of the time I'm just working. Every now and then I afford myself that time to just like fuck around and find out.
Yeah, so you do create moments where you can shine a green light on some tinfoil.
I do. Not nearly as enough as I'd like to, but yeah, for sure.
Yeah, because when you're working with a client, there's this pressure to. I think of it as as a parallel to music. Like if I'm making my own music, I can fuck off and do whatever, right? But if I'm working with a client, everything I'm thinking is how can I satisfy their vision? I'm working in service of something that they want. I'm using my technical knowledge to do it, and I'm not anxious, but I just really want to give them what they wanted. And so experimenting in those moments is a lot harder than when you're just sort of alone. I guess, how do you do that when you're alone? Or do you bring in a subject that's someone that's really comfortable and is like, yeah, I'm just here to mess around?
Like for the experimentation portion of things?
Yeah,
it's one of the nice things about playing with the camera, maybe you found this as well with sound and video. I mean, you do everything. I love that. is people want to get involved and they're itching for it. So like
Yeah.
if there's ever a time where I'm like, you know, what would happen if I threw two mirrors together and just like had somebody sit on them or something like that? I'm like, let me slide through my DMs real quickly and figure out who slid into them recently to be like, hey, you want to collab sometime?
Yeah.
Like there's always somebody waiting.
Yeah. Thank God for those people.
Yeah, truly, because it's fun for me. Like that is like the time that it goes from like me sweating about getting the right product out
Yeah.
to being like, let's do this full thing. I'm not trying to sell short the product portion of it because I really, even in those interactions, I do love the interaction with the person, but I want to get them the simple thing that they came for most of the time.
Have you ever discovered techniques in your playtime that you've brought over into more of the professional world where you're like, oh, I just discovered that this actually works?
Yeah. I mean, going back to everything is like full circle, right? Like, I love old timey and new timey instant cameras. And just recently I've like started to play with like, double exposure and stuff like that. That's like a thing that just used to be, if you're playing with the camera, like, oh, do you do double exposure? And then it's just, you know, everything goes digital. And it's like, I got this nice clean shot where everything is super crisp. And now I feel like everything is coming around again where it's like, how can double exposure come into, a burlesque, I don't know, boudoir, I don't know what I would call some
boudoir.
of those.
I wasn't sure what the term, how you would describe that, your work in that world.
I truly, and this is cheesy as hell, I just call them like celebration sessions, like whatever, like if it's celebrating you, if you're celebrating a specific landmark in your life or something like that, like, because it could be, you know, they range in a number of things, but yeah, and like dragging your shutter speed and stuff like that. Like cameras can do so much, but I think for a long time, people just got very focused on like the technology is getting better. My images should be crisper. The colors should be more accurate to what I'm actually seeing in real life. And yeah, now the more I play with those folks, especially those folks that are willing to just screw around, I'm like, oh, let's just put this camera stupid slow and see what happens. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But they don't have to see those ones.
Right. Just put those aside.
Yeah, exactly.
You also have a love of Polaroid.
Yeah.
And what is it about that format that you love?
Oh, man. One, being the guy that has a camera every time you go to a family function or a band's show where your friend is playing. So it's like, hey, can you bring a camera? Can you bring a camera?
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, but I don't want to work, man. Like
right.
that turns into 200 photos that I got to look through and edit and make pretty because I want you to have a good thing. With this, it's, you get what you get. And I love it. And a lot of times what you get is surprising, less predictable. I mean, that's the thing with the new technology. I was just saying, you can get it to look exactly like it looked like this. I'm like, I don't even know if when I push the button, it's going to fire this time. Like some of them are so old and weird. So there's that. I can still say I'm like contributing to like my friend and family's functions, but like, don't bank on me to be like family documentarian.
Oh, I love that. It puts you in the right dynamic.
Yeah.
It's like you're not trying to be in your professional world right now. So you could still do the thing that you love to do without worrying about satisfaction, you know, like having to hit this moment with someone.
And the same thing applies to those fun sessions that I do. I've been offering it as an add-on for those, and it's people walking away with the physical thing is so cool. Like the gift of like wedding photographers know better than anybody, and I don't do that anymore, but it's like that shit, unless you print it for them and put it in an album, goes on Facebook and then is never seen again. Watching like the joy of somebody just watching a thing develop in front of them and then like kind of turn it towards you and be like, I love this. Can I have it? And you're like, yeah, why not? Like, and your job is done. You don't have to scan it. You don't have to edit it. Like,
more long-term meaning in this little thing that you just one-offed than this thing you spent hours and hours going through.
Going back to, do you think about like the time-based aspect of what you do? In those I do. Cause that is literally one little second, whereas in a digital photo session, I'm like, I got 2,000 photos. I basically took a video of the last 2 hours, you know, stitched this together into one long stop motion animation thing. But those, they're one-off, they're one moment, and I think that's great.
The limitations of a project can actually help define some of the best aspects of it, I think. And if you're working, like I imagine you must have cameras that are kind of wonky, right?
Oh, yeah.
Some that shoot weird, some that give you like all these
like
artifacts
light
or
leaks
things.
and yeah.
Yeah, and that's exciting. Like crisp is good for certain instances, but I find that the more warped and demented it gets, the better.
I mean, that is literally like why Instagram filters exist. Not like the make my skin pretties, but like if you think of the original, like when Instagram came out, it's like everything was like this weird sepia toned
Yeah.
shit that you would throw over like a good photo that you took with a decent phone camera that you were like proud to buy at one time. And then you're like, how can I make this look shitty and weird again?
Yeah.
I just give you shitty and weird straight out of the gate.
That's real life. Like it's
Yeah.
like the projection of real life is Instagram now, where everything is like as crisp and beautiful as it can be. But
Yeah.
yeah, I like that. I also find that it's way easier to be creative, or maybe to be less precious with your process that way. Like you said, I'm capturing this moment, whatever. If it fires, or if it doesn't, this is what we got.
Yeah, for sure.
Tell me about technically how you learned. Polaroid's actually, just a button, but I mean, you
Yeah.
must have, did you have people sort of guiding you through the process of understanding how to get the best out of your work?
I was in the final class at my high school that still had a darkroom. And so like that, I mean, I'm sure a lot of colleges still have darkrooms and stuff like that. I've kept that alive, but like, if that wasn't there then, this never would have happened. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's no way I would have just like thought that a camera was cute long enough for me to like continue to carry it. Like, there was a place that I could use it and like
Yes.
get credits in class and stuff. And so, yeah, so learn the technical stuff there. And also, everybody says it's so easy now because you have Photoshop and Lightroom, but like most of what those programs do is what you would literally do in a dark room. Like that, like, and yeah, there's also just like AI where I can like circle your head and be like, make it a balloon now, which is whatever. Also kind of fun. I don't hate on AI art, but yeah, learning it in the analog was highly helpful and still plays into what I do because I still play with the analog world. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you learn every day? Are you still sort of discovering new things, or do you feel like you hit this plateau where you're like, okay, I know what I need to know for the most part?
No. I mean, yeah, YouTube is just constantly running. While I'm editing photos, like I'm listening to somebody talk about the newest AI feature in Photoshop or a new camera that's coming out that's dropping some feature that I didn't even, couldn't even conceive of the day before. And I love that. I love that it's something I've been thinking about. There are a couple things I've been thinking about recently with how much I love playing with cameras. First one is I love when you watch somebody accidentally enjoy something so much that like they go into their flow state and they don't know how much time has passed. It's like, I'm not watching those videos to torture myself because it's related to my job. It's not like a desk job that I have where I'm like, oh, like how can I do a W9 for somebody better or something like that. It's like, I like the tech. I like the gear. I like doing the thing for the people. That's so douchey. But so there's that. And then there's also, it's still, this is not related to your question, but just ways that I appreciate what I do for myself is it still is kind of a crutch for me. Like I'm not a super social person. I'm an asocial person. But in that world, I love hyping somebody up, gassing them up, getting them to feel themselves, learning about their story. As douchey as that sounds, just like, oh, I just love learning people's stories and blah, blah, everybody's so interesting. But they are. And in creating a situation where I can put them in a position where they're the most photogenic they're going to be, aka they're the most comfortable they're going to be, aka they're like looking good. I see the best in myself. Like, it's like, I don't do, like, if I hang out with my friends, I'm like the most awkward kid in the room. I like, will say like some awkward like fart joke or something like that. Everybody's like, why do we bring this kid? Like, why do we keep bringing this kid around? But in that world, I'm like, I got this on lockdown. Like, this is, it was the right tool to pick up, and I don't see myself putting it down.
That's what's fascinating to me, Mark, I guess, is the way that you're able to create. So when a person comes in to have their photograph taken, they're in potentially one of the most vulnerable positions I can imagine. Like, I always think of going on stage is really tough, but just sitting there, quiet, and like a flash goes off.
Yeah.
It's really scary for people. And so maybe this is a good time where I'm going to go and read you a couple of the reviews I found on your website.
I'm not uncomfortable at all.
Here we go. Mark is a great photographer because he talks to his clients and makes them feel comfortable, and he loves to interact with them. Sounds like kind of just what you said.
Truth.
Mark is a true professional, one who goes above and beyond to communicate with his clients, understands their perspective and ideas, and can create a fun vibe while getting the perfect shot.
Okay.
So atmosphere is just right.
Yeah.
And there's so many more, but this last one is probably my favorite one. This was from, I think, a senior photo session. My daughter is a shy, somewhat stoic girl, and Mark immediately established a rapport that made her relax, open up, and have a blast with the session. From a mom's perspective, I could tell she felt beautiful and comfortable in her own skin, and the portraits reflect that.
Oh, that's amazing. Love that.
I mean, these are glowing reviews, and I, of course, believe them, but the part where I'm just so curious how you build that trust. Like, every personality that comes into your studio is a little bit different, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you must be sort of gauging, what do they want from me? How do they want me to be for them? What's going to be comfortable for them? But how do you sense that? What is that? What's happening in your brain that's making this work so well?
There's a couple things. Some of it is what happens in my brain, and some of it is me realizing that I just have to plan. Like, everybody that I work with, we do either like a grab coffee or Zoom consultation first. So It's never a cold introduction at the door as they're walking in. Like, we've seen each other's faces, and we've interacted a little. I have a bunch of questions ranging from like super serious, like depending on the type of session, I'll ask like, what are your insecurities? Like, let's just air those now so that I don't say, turn to the left if you hate the way your nose looks to the left. But also, you never have to say that or think about that again. You know that I know that, and you could just like trust that I'm keeping that in mind. So a little bit of planning up front, and then, so that's the good part. I don't know.
It seems majorly key to set everything in motion in the right direction.
Yeah, for sure. And like, I get to know their goals. Oh, yeah. So I said from serious to not so serious. I also ask like, what's your WWF entrance music? Like, if you walk into the studio and fireworks are going off on either side of your head, like, what do you want playing in that moment? And I was like, once you get there, you control the soundtrack and like whatever you want to play.
Yeah.
So I let them set the mood to some degree.
Oh, I like that.
If they're full-on adults, like, what's your adult liquid courage beverage of choice? Like, we're not going to go ham, but like, you could have one to take the edge off when you first get there. Other things that are very intentional, when they get there, I immediately say like, all right, take a seat on the couch. Like, I'm not going to put a cannon in your face immediately. Like, let's tell me about your day. Like, what was your 9 to 5 like before you got here?
Ramp up to it a little bit.
Exactly. So all those are the intentional, I would hope anybody that's good at this job already does. And then the other part is, I am so neurotic and in my own head constantly. I think I'm good at being like, oh, I just saw them get weird in a certain way. Adjust, pivot, like, and it could be, I made a posing recommendation and it didn't land quite right. I'm like, cool, never again. Like, we're never saying that again. So part of it is just neuroses and hoping other people's brains work somewhat like I do, so that if there is an eye twitch, I'm like, that meant something. Let's adjust, or let's put the camera down and be like, you want to go back to the couch for a second and
Take a little break.
Like, we don't have to do this all in one shot.
Do you consider yourself empathic in any way? Do you feel their feelings?
I think so. Yeah, I think
through their body language, kind of.
Yeah, and I think it's hard not to. Most of what I do is isolated. Like, isolated, that sounded creepy. It's just the two of us, and that's not always the case. And usually when it's not the case, it's when it's harder for me to do my job. Not because mom or boyfriend is making suggestions, which are usually wrong, in my opinion, but they are two things. They're correcting, which I never correct. I never will be like, why would you do your face that way? Let's adjust it this way. Right. I'm just like, I know from my perspective how you are going to see that from your perspective. I'm just going to make a suggestion where we move to a different thing. So that's one thing.
It takes the judgment lens out when
Yes.
you're not commenting on what went wrong. You're suggesting something new that could be right.
Yes, exactly. And then, people's body language speaks volumes. Like, I don't even think I need to be a super empathic person. I think that I am. But, you know, all the classic, like, if somebody's closing in on themselves, like, that means something. If, you know, they know where the camera is, if there's not a lot of eye contact coming my way, I'm like, all right, you're not comfortable. But again, I think that my strength is like gassing people up. And like, usually I'm just watching, like, as the session goes, like the feathers are unfurling and they're becoming just like the most radiant little peacock over there, to the point where I'm like, okay, you got to go home at some point. Like, we can't keep doing this all day.
That's awesome. That's ultimate success right there. If they're like, yeah, let's just keep going.
Yeah.
They've opened up. Yeah. Let me ask you this. Has there ever been a time where you've failed miserably to get that out of someone, where they've just remained shut the whole time and it just didn't work?
Oh, yeah, I'm sure. I'm trying to think of like instances that are not like embarrassing to talk about other people, but really where I suffer and when others have is when there are other people in the room. Like when I always encourage people as an aid to comfort them, like in any one of those consultations I say I do with everybody, I'm like, feel free to bring somebody. Like if you already have a hype man, like that takes some of the work off of me. I could focus more technically while like Susie's telling you like, get it, girl, oh my God, like handing you another champagne or whatever. But there have been times where I'm just like, that was a very long 2 hours because George was watching from the couch and he was just scowling the entire time. And there are probably other instances where it was just me that failed, but like that's the first thing that comes to mind where I'm just like, I'm always a little uncomfortable in my skin, but for like me not to like peacock out a little after 2 hours means something happened. And those are the instances I think of.
Yeah. I always find that the failures are the times where I learn so much about how to change it for the better. You know, like if something goes really well, I'm like, that was cool. Like, you know, I just rode the wave and it all just sort of happened on its own and I didn't really take any note of anything.
Right.
But when I hit the brick wall, that's when I'm like, oh, wait, now if I ever get in this position again, I have some sense of like how to get out of it. Yep. And has there ever been a time where you're like, you know what, leave George at home. He doesn't need to come this time.
Oh, man. I could never say it. No, I could never. I think that I have, as time has moved on and I've gone through a number of those, like that came to mind immediately when you asked that question. I say, if you feel this, but I'm like, for most part, like, this is a tough thing to do. Like you said, it's super uncomfortable, just like sitting in front of a chair in front of a camera. Like, usually I add on like having more of an audience can be a little bit more of a, you know, a little more confusing, a little bit more distracting for you. Right. So I try to both make the offer and then like pivot away from it quickly. Like, it's going to be better if it's just the two of us.
Artfully done. Yes, yeah. That's cool. Let's talk just briefly about the idea of taking your hobby, your passion, your interest, and turning it into a profession. When did you make that decision? How long did it take to sort of fulfill that dream, and what was it like along the way?
So I did the volunteering, Peace Corps, played with my camera, came home, had no money because I was volunteering for 4 years, and I needed money in my hand immediately. And one of your past guest, John Toohill, was working at Pano's as the bar manager, and I was like, can I be a bartender? And it took me about 2 days to realize I did not want to be a bartender. But I worked there long enough to get enough singles into my hand to have enough free time to start just using my camera. And it started super clinical and not in a way that I would ever go back to. I was shooting real estate because real estate agents are a dime a dozen in this town and most other towns. And so it wasn't quite a relationship yet, but it was this transactional thing where I'm like, I can play with the camera and I can get paid. I still hate my life. Like
something's not right.
This is not fun. And I mean, like for so many other people, and so within that, there would be like little fun portrait sessions and senior portraits and stuff like that, the occasional wedding. But it was like, you know, at the time I prided myself on saying like, oh, I'm a jack of all trades with a camera. But that is, to anybody listening that is a creative out there, for your own sake, like hone down, like whatever is actually interesting to you is going to be both, you know, spiritually rewarding, but also you will find a way to make that work into a financially rewarding thing. And so when COVID hit, I had a tiny, tiny, tiny studio. Forever grateful for it, where I really feel like I started. And I was like, I don't want to walk into strangers' houses when things are so questionable. Like when the world is burning, like I want to be at home. And that was kind of like my photographic home for a while. And the first projects that I did that were kind of both truly passion related and camera related was I was photographing like family heirlooms for people. So it wasn't people. It wasn't like true portraits, but like people would be like, grandpa died last year and we have this really cool bomber jacket and he has 27 grandkids. They all want it. And I'm like, 27 grandkids can have a version of it. And so I'd bring it to the studio, like basically treat it like a Nike shoe for a Nike ad or something like that with the most respect, cool angles and lighting and stuff. And none of my job was miserable. And I was playing with my camera. I'm like, okay, so the studio is my home. How can I continue to grow this in a way that affords me the lifestyle that I want, gets me to hang out with the people that I want to, and now we're back to people. But
yeah. I like the advice. If you're going in too many directions, you're never going to really get to where you want to go. You sort of have to narrow the path, right?
Yeah, I think so. And I mean, it was fun. Like I used to always brag, like every day's a little bit different. When you're doing a wedding one day and then a house the next day. Cool, variety is the spice of life.
Yeah,
which is true, but there's always a little spice in everything that you're doing. And even if you're doing one passionate thing, you're gonna do it better if that's all you're doing every day.
True.
As opposed to trying to watch a million YouTube videos about how to real estate photograph things, how to take pictures of a baby in a flattering way. Now we got the pregnant, yeah.
Let's sort of transition into a little bit of a lightning round of questions for you.
This.
We touched on it earlier, but I'm curious because I actually saw something came up on Instagram of a photographer who was sort of offering pose positions to the subject, and it was like, whoa, this guy is great. Like, just move your hip like this, drop your shoulder like this. And I'm like, how do you develop that skill? How do you sense in the person what they need to do? Where does that come from for you? Is it just studying anatomy and thinking of it that way? Or?
Oh, there's so many cheats here. One, try it out in your head. Like, just like if you're looking at the person and you know what is flattering on that person, it's almost, and this is brutally honest, and I feel like I'm going to regret saying this. It's kind of a selfish act to be like, I think it would look cool to look at you if you did this or that. And again, that could be headshot to the other stuff. Like, and one of the things I do with people with headshots is like, all I'm getting is like collarbone up, but I'm like, stick your butt towards the back of the wall, like lean in towards me, like, little things that you just know work. And then also a little cheat. I'm going to let you behind the curtain a little bit here.
Let me in.
I take pictures of my computer screen before people come in with poses that I like. So I take a picture of you. I'm suffering for an idea for like a cool pose for like Brandon, who's got this like really cute tush. I'm like, where's my tush pose? I'll scroll back in my photos that are in my camera. They think I'm looking at them, but I'm actually looking at photos of my screen that had good ideas that I liked earlier.
I love that. Secrets.
A little bit of immediate selfishness where I'm like, I think that would look cool versus like, yeah, I'm cheating.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
Who is the greatest photographer of all time, in your opinion?
Oh, man. First thing that comes to mind, that's always got to be honest. Of all time, though, that's tough. I'm going to go of this time. There's a guy named Nick Fancher who everything from bands to celebrities to like senior photos, like it's cool because he's not cocky about his work. He's like, I'm still accessible. Like anybody could work with me. And he just does the opposite of what I talked about earlier, where I'm like, prescribing to a certain method because I know it will get a marketable result for the person who walked in and they walk away confident. He's like, I broke a piece of glass and I'm shooting through that. Like, he's like, my hand is bleeding because like I just broke that glass. Or he'll take pictures of like amoebas and then project that on a person's face and take pictures of that, or have that. Like the thing I was talking about with stretching out shutter speed where you get like lots of blur. Like he's just like, the camera can do so much other than take a clear photo, and he does. And I think that everybody that works with him just gasps at the back of his camera every time he works. Like there's no way, because it's shocking. It's unexpected because he's using the tool to its like maximum abilities.
Man, I can't wait to look him up. That's
Please
really
do.
interesting. I have not heard of him. Do you have a favorite photo that you've ever taken?
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah. When I was in the Philippines, one of the volunteer gigs I had that did not relate to my camera, but I could not carry it at the time. I was in Manila, which is like when you, I don't, for anybody who knows Manila, there's that, but like, most people don't. And it's like, think of like a crowded Indian city, like just like elbow to elbow people everywhere you go, horrible air quality. There were a lot of great things too. I mean, the disparity between the poverty on the streets and the skyscrapers that were next to them was like smacking you in the face constantly. And while I was there, I was volunteering with a group of squatters who, in the 70s, I think it was, the streets were so overrun with people that they all broke into, not all, but many of them broke into a cemetery. Because it rains so much there, they don't bury in the ground. It's all mausoleums. So like almost like little houses.
Yeah.
And 20,000 people, I think, made this cemetery their homes. They just broke into the mausoleums and lived there. So my goal with working with them, with another organization, was to try to get kids back in school, teach parents about, safe sex practices so that they would have less children. And there's one day I was teaching these kids, failing miserably. Like I was like trying to learn languages, like one a week. I'm like, oh, like Tagalog, what's that? Let's try to learn that so I could teach these kids. And fortunately there was a lot of English there. This one kid was like, so my friend here used to live under the mausoleum that we're teaching in right now. I was like, oh, that's great. There's a basement to this one? He's like, yeah, there's a basement. And so we kind of go outside and the basement is locked off. There's think of like a classic prison door in front of it. Like you can picture somebody rattling the can across it. And through this translator, he's telling me that this kid lived under there. The reason they moved out was when it rained, and boy, does it rain there, it would flood so high that they would like almost be drowning. So they found like a different mausoleum to live in. And the kid added on, and the bones were really like scaring him or something. I was like, the bones? It turned out that this mausoleum was where they would store the bones of people whose families didn't pay rent for their mausoleum outside of it. So think of all of those mausoleums that make up the whole cemetery. They're basically like apartments, and you have family members paying to have you in them. And the second your family stops paying to have your corpse in these mausoleums, they shove you in the basement of this mausoleum where this kid lived. And so like my mind is slowly melting out of my ear. I'm like, what is going on right now? And the kid goes down and reaches through that bar door and pulls out a skull and starts playing with it like it's like a little ventriloquist doll. And the bottom jaw fell off, and he joked, the one word that I understand was that now he's mute, like he can't talk anymore because he doesn't have his bottom jaw. And I just like slowly lifted my camera and went click, like what is happening right now? God. Oh, and in the picture the kid is like holding his finger up to his lips like shh, like we can't talk because he can't talk. That's incredible. It's a heavy one. So
wow.
Yeah.
Are there any other places in the world that you want to go to see if moments like that sort of creep up, if you can kind of connect to this, like, I mean, that in the United States, I don't think you're ever going to find something like that.
No, yeah.
So you have to be overseas do you want to travel around and look for that stuff, or are you content with it sort of coming to you?
I do. I mean, my goal when I first came home, as I was realizing I didn't want to be a bartender, I was like, I think that what I was just doing is what I was supposed to do.
Yeah.
So I had this goal in my head of getting back out there, either volunteering or working for the UN or something like that. Probably due in part to laziness, I never got there. But then also, I was there for 4 years, and like, as much as I couldn't understand everything the kid was saying, I had worked with him for months before we had that conversation. Same with like the hurricane victims. Like I had already lived there for 2 years. And when big events happened like that hurricane, I saw the UN come, and I saw random churches send volunteers over, and I'm like, all good is good, but there was no way I would feel that I would be able to generate those authentic interactions in a way that I knew everybody would be comfortable with me doing that slow camera lift click. Like, that kid had no beef. If I was a random person that came in for like tourism and I was doing that, that would be awful. So,
yeah, good point.
Yeah.
It's all about, it seems like building the relationship is well before the photo ever happens for you.
Oh yeah. Yeah, Catherine, my now wife, which is weird to say, she always says like, "Oh, you're a better flirt than you are a photographer any day." And she's talking about 70-year-old men too. Like, I just love like telling people like, "Look how cute you look right now."
Yeah.
And there's obviously more to the relationship than that, but yeah, that's basically her saying like, "You're good with a camera, but you really like just making people feel good."
It seems like the most prerequisite thing you must be capable of is to be a great flirt. If you're going to use that camera and get the best out of them, you really need that sort of skill set.
And I've worked with amazing photographers in this town and other places who are so technically good. And then I see them interact with people. I was like, what is happening? You said that to that person. You yelled at them like that. You handled them like that. Like, I'm always like 20 feet away. Like, again, fun stuff or normal corporate headshots. I'm like, people's space is a precious thing to them, especially in a time when it's just the two of you in a room. And of course they're already uncomfortable. I don't want to be on the other side of the camera. Like, why would you?
You ever see Whiplash?
Yeah.
That whole debate about what it takes to bring greatness out of someone. Do you need to create a lot of suffering in them to bring greatness out? Or can you be loving and bring it out? And like, it goes around and around. I don't feel like that movie really answers that question, but I think that's the age-old question is, how do you get there?
Yeah.
How do you get to that greatness?
Yeah.
Really interesting. Okay, here's one last thing. I'd be remiss if I didn't bring this up. I mean, we have so much crossover going back through time, whether it be at Fredonia, and we were listening to Elad Love Affair, a little plug for Mark Soul's music. But I would say probably about 2009 or so, I got a call from ECMC Hospital, and they said, your partner has been in an accident. We can't tell you what happened. You need to come down. And I was like, oh my God, what's going on? Really terrifying. I run down and, my partner was there in the emergency room. They had been hit by a car. They were on their bike, and I think a guy was going the wrong way on a one-way street, and it actually split her liver in half. And so it was like a very serious injury. Like, we don't know if she's going to make it. And thank God, months of recovery, she's great now. But I found out that the first person on the scene of that accident was Mark Duggan.
Yeah.
I don't think we've ever really talked about your POV on this thing, but can you walk me through what happened there?
Yeah, I was on the phone. My porch faced that intersection rather. And it was, I could not tell you who I was talking to, but I remember like basically like a cartoon character, like the phone just slipped out of my hand because I think he was going both the wrong direction on a one-way, because that intersection was definitely a one-way. I want to say he just like blew through a stop sign too. So like there was no way she would have had any reason to look in that direction if she trusted people stopped at intersections and were driving in the right direction.
Right.
It was a cataclysmic event for her, but also like I walked up and she's like kind of crying, like kind of confused, like how hurt am I? And she's like, Mark Duggan? I was like, wait, well, you shouldn't do that now. Like, yeah, we'll talk about that later. But yeah, just, I've been the opposite end of that interaction too. And it's nice when somebody is just calm, cool, collected, and like, everything's going to be fine. The phone is like already been dialed. Like, let's just sit here and chat for a second. So, but it wild. And I think about it frequently too. Like I've had other friends who have had bike accidents like that, and I love riding my bike, and that helmet's always going to be up there. It's not going to protect my liver very well, but like,
what you can do.
There are the days when I'm leaving the house and I'm feeling a little vain and the hair look cute, and I'm like, no, throw the helmet on, because that guy will drive the wrong way down that road that day. But, And I'm glad that it gave us more reason to cross paths. And
When I heard that, you were the first responder in this incident, I thought, I can't think of anyone better that could be there to. We've talked so much about your ability to just connect with people in a vulnerable moment and talk about vulnerable. I mean, you're there wondering, like, am I okay? Like, am I going to make it? I don't know what just happened. And so I was so thankful to hear that you were there, man. I really just appreciate whatever fate, universe, timing allowed someone who was caring and compassionate to be there for her in that moment. It was just so scary. And also, like, Mark Duggan? Like,
it was
random.
It was surreal for me. I'm like, you just went through this thing. I'm like, oh, this is a little trip down memory lane. Like, no, focus.
Strange, man. Yeah. All right. Well, as we sort of come to a close here, I want to just wrap up with a future question. What's something that you want to do with a camera that you haven't done yet?
Long pause. You can edit that out. I used to say, especially during that whole Peace Corps chapter, that my camera was basically like a passport in other people's lives. Like, it afforded me those long interactions in very specific, sometimes traumatic, like the experience you just talked about, but something somebody's going through for 6 months, maybe if they lost their house during a hurricane. It would offer me an ability and a true reason that was unselfish to interact with people. Getting back to that to some degree. I absolutely love my studio. It's a super comfortable space that, I mean, it's like a Simpsons arcade game. Like, it's just like cozy and comfortable, and I can control the light and stuff like that. But getting back out of my comfort zone and into other people's lives that I couldn't predict would be great. And I'm super fortunate that my wife is a flight attendant, so we can travel basically anywhere for basically nothing. Wow. And I think using my skill with a camera and that ability that she affords me to somehow cross paths and help folks out. Don't be selfish. Not everything has to be business related. And just learn more about people that live in Montana or wherever I end up,
Where does that "don't be selfish" vibe come from?
I'm aware. I'm by nature a procrastinator. Is the thing I am most aware about and like least about myself. So with that comes what I do with my camera usually is exactly what I need to do that day to meet somebody's expectations on like a business transaction. Like we were talking about like collabs and stuff like that earlier. I have so few of them because I don't give myself that time. And the end result is so much of my mental capacity has to be focused on like, I got to get work. Like I got to pay bills. And I just wish it didn't have to be that way as much. And it doesn't. It's all part of growth. And like, the ideal is to not make the most off of every job, because that is what feels like selfishness, and be more content with where I'm at lifestyle wise and stuff like that, so that I can take more pro bono work, or, again, just go back to volunteering with my camera like I used to, as opposed to, it's interesting because it is my hobby. Like I said, I love geeking out on cameras and stuff like that, but it's weird when your hobby is your job. And
right.
And you have to think about how the thing that you enjoy doing most of the time is paying for the roof over your head. Yeah.
It's a balancing act. Well, what you described before sounded like an interesting door opening, which is renting your studio out to give yourself more time to do this in the world type of photography.
Yes.
So it seems like there are ways, and maybe it's all just about sort of orienting yourself in that direction. Like you said, sort of putting yourself on the pathway, making it happen.
Yeah, changing the mindset a little bit and just pushing in that direction.
Right on. I think that's a great place to wrap it up, Mark. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so
Same.
much for being here.
Thank you. I appreciate you.